What's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video. Sort of. Remember, if you like the video, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you want. Appreciate it. Thanks. Today's video is going to be even more rambly than usual. And it's about appreciating the small things. Much like my penis, which you can see on OnlyFans. 7.5 inches. You don't have to be gay to go to my OnlyFans. Come on. Support the channel. If you're not going to support the YouTube, support the OnlyFans. So, like I said, kind of a rambly video and just appreciating the little things about Street Fighter. A mishmash of, like, you know, appreciating old school fundamentals. And obviously I've made a lot of videos talking about Footsies and neutral and old school Street Fighter. And this is going to kind of encompass a lot of those ideas. And just, if you're a nerd, maybe you'll like these kind of videos, because I've always said I just never feel like playing new school games, really. It's not that I don't mind doing combos in them, but, you know, it's just they're not foundationally solid games, right? And when I look back on old school Street Fighter, there's just so many minute, small, foundational, however big or small you want to call it, they still make me excited about fighting games. Even, like I said, it's crazy to me that I can watch old school Street Fighter matches and it still feels more exciting to me than watching new school games. And anyway, let's look at some of those clips, and we're going to talk about lots of different things that I've talked about in those videos. How not every character has to poke the same way, not giving every character the same win condition, you know, proximity blocking and guard. You know, some people don't like it, all this kind of stuff. Let's just look at some of these examples. Just, again, a nerdy video. If you don't like these kind of nerdy videos, don't watch them. But you can go to the OnlyFans. Support the channel in that way. So what did I show originally in this clip? I think I'm talking about, I think I should just, again, little minute things, right? We get swept right there. But remember, something you got to remember about old school Street Fighter is when characters are whiffing moves, you know, a lot of characters can actually, like, pull back. So when you see Ryu do a stand short, he's not just faking a fireball. He's also pulling back during footsies, right? That allows him to punish, and it's also causing that proximity guard, which kind of creates this sort of magnet effect and this sort of, like, delay for the other character, even if you don't hit them. And this is what I show when we start off with, right? So I do stand short from the same distance, right? Ooh, look at that. What a great freeze frame I did right there. Boom. I'm able to punish him, right? Let's show, again, look at this. Boom. I can get swept right there. But at these distances where you might think a character's just whiffing a normal for no reason, it actually does allow them to punish things that you might not normally think, right? Boom, just like this. Oh boy, we can actually punish there's a punish you don't see very often, or I don't think I've actually ever seen anyone do that. But you probably don't see a lot of people do that because, you know, not every character has as slow of a move as Ryu's duck roundhouse. But so say if the character were to do a duck forward, obviously, you know, you don't get the punish with the same things like that, right? Now, something as well that I've showed here, right? Remember, when you're whiffing moves, right? It's not just this idea when, you know, it's funny. I don't see other people commentate about this when they talk about Street Fighter, but you got to remember, think about the fucking gravitational pull of proximity guard in old school Street Fighter when you're in neutral and footsies, right? So I whiff a stand short right here, right? Now I can grab the guy, right? Because he was not letting go of the controller or, you know, whiffing moves himself, which is something, it's sort of a, you know, it's something that I really enjoy about old school Street Fighter. The idea that, you know, you want to keep on whiffing moves, right? Or you want to let the controller go. You don't want to even go into proximity guard because it puts you at a disadvantage. So if we were to watch this again right here, now I think I show, what do I do right here? Let's say. So I whiff a move and we're at this range where we would be punishing the duck roundhouse as well, or another character's footsies, right? And because I whiff that, it doesn't actually put me into the same sort of proximity guard stun, which allows me to then walk away from a potential throw. We'll watch it again right here. Boom. Do you see how I went into neutral before I did? So if I were just holding back the whole time, I would have a longer delay with the proximity guard. But because I was in neutral before it started, it allowed me to walk away from the throw. Now we'll watch this again. See, just if I were to duck here, boom. You see how he's still in block even though I'm trying to walk away and I get thrown. That is such a minute thing that I think is really fascinating about old school Street Fighter. Even though you see people talk like, oh, you're just whiffing moves. Excuse me, sorry. Got a little bit of a cold kind. You're just whiffing moves for like a fake fireball or something like that. You got to appreciate this gravitational magnetic pull that proximity guard did in old school Street Fighter, right? Again, and that was just low. That was just to show that I actually got thrown there, right? Slow motion. Let's look at a bizarre example that I haven't shown before. And this is when we're talking about how just not every character could poke the same way, right? And characters actually had moves that could whiff you when you're ducking, right? So let's look at this is a bizarre example, but we're going to show it, right? So let's say we're Ryu, right? I whiff a stand roundhouse, right? But the move has such long lag that it keeps the opponent stuck in that proximity guard longer, right? So even though I whiffed a stand roundhouse from right there, I can't even get away from the throw if I respect it. If I respect it, and I'm not trying to always constantly be checking or whiffing these moves in neutral, I get thrown there, right? And I go back here, we'll see it just again. Because I didn't try to block it, respect it, right? And I'm just in neutral, I can actually start to walk away from the throw, right? Now, see, I whiffed the stand short there, even though I went into proximity guard at first. Even though I went into proximity guard at first and I stand short, guess what? It then will allow me to walk away from the throw. Isn't that kind of like an incredible little nuance of old school Street Fighter that is really nice? Let's look at an example here. Let's say I'm in the corner, right? So I do a move that actually puts the opponent in stun, right? So they're already in this like frame advantage of like block stun, right? Duck strong, stand roundhouse, right? Now what happens? Even though I'm trying to jump away, I cannot jump away from that throw. Isn't that kind of crazy? Obviously, throws don't combo. But because I decided to respect the stand roundhouse when I didn't have to, I can't actually jump away from that throw like that. And if, this is a very nuanced sort of example, not saying this is like broken, but it kind of illustrates a point. So duck roundhouse, right? Or duck strong. Now I'm still in the stun of the duck strong. But if I let go of the controller because I don't want to respect the stand, roundhouse, whatever, it then allows me to actually jump away. But because I'm in the corner, then I actually get hit by that. A little weird kind of trick you can do, but that's pretty cool, right? I love those little things too. Now let's talk about the beauty of, again, not every character poked in the same way in old school Street Fighter. And it was once we got the games like Championship Edition, Ryu, he was able to poke with his fireball. And why is something like this so important, right? Now, if you see the blue there at the bottom, there's like these 3 hitboxes, right? So in Championship Edition, that bottom blue hitbox, and of course we didn't talk about hitboxes and hurtboxes, but this is one of the few examples of why if you really want to know why something works, sometimes hitboxes and hurtboxes can be useful, but generally speaking, I think that people overemphasize them, right? I have no problem with a person calling a move priority myself, but we just kind of said that, Ryu's fireball now wins. So we didn't talk about this hurtbox or hitbox, but looking at hitboxes and hurtboxes now, you can see compared to the original Street Fighter 2, whereas in the original Street Fighter 2, the 2 blue boxes might be matched up. Once you got the Championship Edition, the bottom moves back a little bit, and it moves back at his feet. And why is something like this so important? This is so important because of Footsies. And we used to call Footsies things because characters used to be able to duck moves, right? You know what I mean? So having a powerful attack on the ground that could hit you ducking was often a low attack to your knees, right? So thus the fireball becomes a important poke, right? A beautiful thing. Right? Let's look at this. Let's look at some examples of what I'm going to be talking about here, right? So of course we have, again, footsies. I just love, I don't know, I know it probably makes me sound like a nerd. I love the idea of just mashing on duck short to beat things. It's just fun to me, right? Boom, boom. Of course, old school Ryu does this better than new school Ryu, right? New school Ryu can do a little bit, but it doesn't work quite as good, right? And something like this is important because when you're playing footsies like that, characters are also doing those moves, right? So let's look at some examples here. So Ryu pulls back, right, with the fireball, right? And he's the fireball. And that's more important with the character like new Ryu, because new Ryu cannot mash on duck short, right? And when I've talked about the progression of footsies and Super Turbo, right? So poking with the fireball is even more important in Super Turbo than Super, so to speak, because I can't mash on duck short to win from the same ranges, right? I have to use more of my tools in my arsenal, right? This is also important because guess what? At the range that you fireball a lot of these pokes, because if we're thinking about a game, right? Obviously you want to do the poke from the farthest distance you can where it has the most priority just to make people mad. Well, at the distance that these pokes have the best priority that they often have, because of this chaos in the balance, this balance in the chaos, I often can't actually dragon punch your high priority poke, even though people want to say dragon punchers are so powerful, blah, blah, blah. And I've used that example of old school games of the Sagat Ryu example often, right? But we're using a Ryu versus Ryu example here. If we're playing footsies at this sort of, let's say, perfect range, right? I can't dragon punch your footsies anyway. I have to fireball it, right? Because I won't hit, right? There you go. There again, I can fireball it, right? But if I try to dragon punch it, I can't. And of course, just to show example, right? That's why a duck short might be useful, because then since I'm mashing that so fast, then he eventually pulls into it with the fireball. Right? And then I think I show an example of, yeah, because you can't dragon punch that, right? Boom. Now, of course, old school Ryu, because new school Ryu has worse priority on his moves, he can still dragon punch that, right? But boom, 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 boom. Let's look at some examples of Ryu versus Guile, right? And I think I show some examples of why I actually think, although a lot of people talk about the Ryu versus Guile and hyper fighting is such an iconic matchup, I still think it's very iconic even in fucking Super Turbo. In Super Turbo, Ryu versus Guile kind of proves, I think, in a way, why Super Turbo is a better game than hyper fighting, I think, if you think about it objectively, because it shows the progression of such a iconic matchup, really, right? So we're thinking about old school Street Fighter, right? Remember, this is very important, right? Because Guile has such a long range attack in his duck forward, right? But I have this sort of, my footsies, and this is why we used to call it footsies, right? It's sort of like this impenetrable force field that checks the opponent while trying to let myself in, right? Boom, 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 forward, boom, 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 boom. Now, new school Ryu can do this a little bit too, but not as well. And then as well, we're thinking about one of the reasons why, and I'm going to show another reason too, why I think Super Turbo Ryu vs. Guile is so interesting, because guess what? At that same range where Ryu used to always duck short footsies to check you, guess what? They gave Guile the Sabat kick. And Sabat kick is also an attack that hits you while you're ducking, which is so rare in an old school game like Street Fighter. Because back in old school Street Fighter, being able to poke the guy where he cannot duck is actually something that's special. Not something like new school Street Fighter where every fucking attack hits you ducking, right? That's an important sort of, flip on the matchup. And just like this, they gave Ryu the overhead. I just think of those two examples of like, whoa, what a fundamental change to fucking Ryu versus Guile, right? Because if we look at some of these footsies, just to show this for an example, remember, and going back to the fireballs of poke, well, if I try to use my stand short at this sort of range, right? I'm not in range to sweep him, right? Just like it's harder to DP this range. But then guess what? We have the fireball. Look at that. He pulls back when he does the fireball and boom. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Boom. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, Bob. So again, I always think that's an amazing example of the little things in old school Street Fighter that are beautiful. when you look at them, right? Now, if we think about Footsies going into a game like Street Fighter Alpha, again, we still have, a lot of moves can whiff you, but they did augment, right, Ryu's sort of traditional style, and you could say because they removed proximity normals as well, which, had a bad effect too, because certainly Shotos should not have a stand strong that hits you ducking. I mean, just absolutely obnoxious, but what they did give Ryu in this game is they gave him the stand forward, right? And the stand forward actually kind of functions, like I said, if you think about the old school Super Turbo, of pulling back with the stand short, because you can see the hurt box, right? You can see his blue hurt box. He pulls back with it, right? Because Ryu doesn't have the traditional stand short. So he pulls back and then he comes down on your head. And let's just think of that as almost like pulling back with the stand short in Super Turbo and then sweeping you. And I think it's almost a genius kind of way of a developer or a director, designer being like, hey, we cannot have proximity normals. But I like the idea of Ryu pulling back with the stand short and being able to sweep you in Street Fighter 2. So Billy Bob, whoever was making Street Fighter Alpha, take Ryu's moves that he has and let's put this mind game into one move. Figure out how to do this. And I always think this is actually a pretty interesting example, right? And of course he has the hop kick too, right? So think about examples right here. Boom, boom. So boom. Ryu can sort of do this a little bit, and I'm going to show how it doesn't exactly work the same in Street Fighter Alpha. But again, we're talking about the progression of like Footsies and Ryu's character a little bit too. Ryu can do this a little bit in Alpha 1, but it's harder. It's much more specific, but you can see if you've ever played Alpha 1, there's these like sort of positions, right? The sort of duck short to slowly move your way in, but it doesn't work as well as fucking old school Street Fighter. So he can't work his way in. So once he starts to work his way a little bit in more, then they gave him the hop kick that works. And if he was in a little bit closer, you're back to doing the fireball or the new stand forward, right? And I think it's a pretty interesting positionally speaking, right? Because you have the fireball once you get a little bit closer, right? And the stand forward, right? So you have duck short position, moving your way in. Now you're at this position. Duck short doesn't work anymore in Alpha, right? But they gave him the hop kick. Hop kick, but if you're a little bit closer, fireball or the stand forward, which functions as your old stand short to sweep during Footsies, which I think is pretty interesting, right? Again, I like these little things to me. They're interesting to me. But again, just to show an example of how it's much more specific in Alpha 1, right, to do that. But that's why they gave him the hop kick, right? And that's why once you get a little bit closer, you do the fireball. Fireball again. Boom, 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 boom. You see these little ranges right there? The stand forward. The same range that you might fireball poke, right? Oh, look at it. It's a beautiful... That's why I said I made multiple videos about that. It's sad that they took that out of Alpha. He can pull back a little bit in Alpha 2. Excuse me, in Alpha 1 it works better, but in Alpha 2 when you try to do it, once he actually can hit you, they move the blue box forward. And so then he gets hit, and it's like, what? You just ruined a beautiful thing. You ruined a beautiful thing. I don't know why they did that in Alpha 2. Terrible. Now, another thing, Alpha 1 did do this a little bit better than Super Turbo. So Super Turbo does have a thing where that some characters that have oppressive sort of footsie pokes, right, that can beat these sort of footsies, their blue hurt box actually will raise a little bit that gives you a little bit of a strange checking tool versus them that normally you might not think of, right? So if we're thinking about Ryu or DJ doing this, annoying duck strong, it's a little bit hard. You got to try to like red fireball it with Ryu, right? Because if you keep trying to do this, you're going to get beat. But when I'm talking about being able to check it, now normally that misses characters, but Super Turbo did start to play around. They started to change footsies a little bit. And that's why I say Super Turbo is an interesting game, because you start to see the progression of footsies and little ideas are being thrown in there, right? So if we're to look at a game like Alpha 1, guess what? They also added that to a character like Ryu. Boom. What? Now, interesting as well in Alpha 1, guess what? they didn't give this to Dan, which I thought was very interesting. Can you see the hitboxes? Or sorry, can I pause it at the right thing? Let's see if I can pause it at the right thing. This is the production value. I'm just rambling. Yeah, do you see how Ken, look at his hurt box right there. But for Dan, they didn't give that. Isn't that kind of interesting? Because Dan is kind of his move, he's slower. So like, okay, this is not going to be oppressive with Dan, right? So you see there, I get to hit him, but it can. See, I think that's pretty interesting. Now they got rid of this in Alpha 2 because Alpha 2, I guess Dan's just supposed to have all the bad, none of the good. But then in Alpha 2, again, we have an oppressive poke, let's say, or an aggressive check to my check, an aggressive check to my check, potentially. But you have a weird call out in that you can, well, guess what? Stand fierce it. I think that's kind of an interesting progression that the Alpha games started to play around with a little bit more, right? Because again, normally this stuff like this doesn't hit, right? So anyway, talking more about footsies. I think I really like this. I know, such a rambly video. When every character didn't poke the same way, right? And you have this idea. And of course I could be doing some stand jabs here and there, but you know, Ryu, he's trying to check to get into you, right? But when he's checking you, he has to stop for a second because he has to duck. Technically, he has to stop his momentum. But when you think about, you know, games like, say, Street Fighter 6 or whatever it might be, when a character never has to have that fear of like ducking, whatever, and every move can hit you ducking, I don't have to pace myself when I'm like moving my way in as much, right? Whereas a character like Ryu, I have to like pace myself a little bit while checking. But if it's like a game like Street Fighter 6, well, it's not like you can duck it anyway. And it's not like I have to duck, right? So I can constantly be moving forward, right? At the same tempo. Not every character should be able to walk forward and check you the same way, right? And again, this is just more appreciating these different distances of, you know, even a game. And I love using a game like Street Fighter Alpha because it's a fucking ghetto game, but for some reason it still holds up pretty well. And of course the hop kick, again, it's still, even though you might think that the hop kick might traditionally augment Ryu's traditional style too much, right? The Alpha 1 hop kick is fairly well designed. I mean, you can't do it so close or else you're going to get thrown, right? And so then you have to whatever. So there's like thought process into it. And because, you know, I've made many videos saying that the hop kick is such a, you know, such a curveball in Ryu's sort of traditional toolkit that it's a move that has to be treated with care. And Alpha 1 does a fairly good job of it, right? But then you look at games like Street Fighter 6 and it's just like, what a clusterfuck. What are they thinking? Why are old school games better designed than new school games? And then, of course, talking about, you know, the progression of Street Fighter, you know, this is a beautiful thing. Just these little differentiations, like that, like Ken can walk forward while poking you. That's something Ryu can't do. Being able to walk forward while poking you is special. Just like E Honda, right? E Honda being able to fireball and the hurt box or the hitbox on his hand is so big and the hurt box is so back. I can walk forward and almost check these fireballs, right? And again, once I get close, you have to respect this. I can actually walk forward, right? It's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And remember, I can't just DP it for free, even though dragon punches are so overpowered. This balance in the chaos, right? Guess what? I don't even give a fuck. I don't know. A very rambly video, but just combining a mishmash of lots of different things that I've talked about old school Street Fighter. I don't know. Long video, just kind of nerding out here. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel. If you appreciate it, or if I appreciate it, if you appreciate it, you can donate too. Or you want to see my dick on OnlyFans, you can appreciate it there. Anyway, the end.